Representative Michelle Lujan Grisham has organized a foreclosure prevention workshop that's happening Saturday, November 2nd at West Mesa High School, beginning at 9 a.m. New Mexico in Focus sat down with the Congresswoman in her Albuquerque office to talk about this and many other items of concern to New Mexicans. Here's NMIF correspondent Gwyneth Doland.
Representative, thank you for being with us here today.
Absolutely, I'm really delighted. Thank you.
According to the latest figures, for the foreclosure rate in New Mexico is at the lowest it's been in 5 years, but still hundreds of New Mexicans face losing their homes to foreclosure every month. What are the factors that are combining to make this such a continuing problem?
Well, part of it is that it takes so long to get through the process once you've defaulted or you're struggling to make your payments on time that I think that people forget that it's years and years and years and you're still caught in that situation. So that's part of it, even though current foreclosure rates are down. The economy is a little bit better around the country, although I think New Mexico is struggling still. We're not seeing the same kind of impact. But the other issue is that we've got more than 1,100 abandoned houses. Those folks could potentially face deficiency judgments. They need to get them resolved. We really want to reach out to the families and the community in general, and it causes other property losses in those neighborhoods where you've got abandoned houses. And where we're doing our foreclosure workshop, one of the highest foreclosure rates in Albuquerque still. And remember that we've got 5,100 homes in active foreclosure just in this community.
And so where is this area of town that is the most
West
affected?
Side, South Valley, one of the hardest hit in all of Albuquerque. So our foreclosure or consumer workshop is going to happen at West Mesa High School on November 2nd from 9 to 3 o'clock. And we'd like folks to get there at about 8:30 so that you can get you registered.
One of the things we've been talking about with foreclosures is the number of scams that have been floating around targeting folks who are in foreclosure. Does your clinic address any of these scams and how to avoid them?
Absolutely. So while folks are meeting with banks who are going to be on site to renegotiate loans, because we want there to be a resolution. Education is important, consumer protection is important, but we also want to be problem solving. So while you're waiting for that appointment, you can meet with a counselor and a lawyer, and we've got educational components that address the targeting and scam artists, what to look out for, who we know is problematic in this community in the Southwest. We want to arm people with as much good advice to make good, productive, protective decisions for the future.
Let's keep talking about money and the New Mexico economy a little bit. You've spoken out against cuts to SNAP, food stamps, and you voted against a recent bill to cut those benefits. Given the budget problems in D.C., it seems unlikely that SNAP is going to avoid cuts. But are there other ways to address hunger in New Mexico?
Well, there's not a single size solution, in my opinion, that's going to be big enough to address hunger in New Mexico. And in places where we've really got significant poverty issues, significant situations with young single heads of household. I mean, you have to take New Mexico in the context that it is. This is a poor, diverse, and a state that's got some real significant socioeconomic challenges. And so the notion, I mean, we've got outside experts who have said this is one of the poorest, hungriest states in the nation, and its food insecurity for children is in fact drastic. Well, that's enough for me to say the federal government must do its fair share to make sure that we don't have anybody else and any more children falling into hunger. And two, we need our private sector partners do as much as they can. But you know, they are, and in this economy, they don't have the same kind of philanthropic efforts. We don't have the same kind of job opportunities. You're not seeing job growth. So it's a really terrible situation. Private sector food banks need more, not enough jobs to meet the needs, certainly not good paying jobs to get you out of poverty. And we've got a growing group, right, affected by those two dynamics who can't get their basic nutritional standards met. So I say federal government should do its share. I want the private sector to keep doing its share. I'm very proud of those partners. I want state government to do its share. And I'm really working on job growth and job creation and improving the economy so that we can, and you know, food stamps. has shown over time that it's got the best evidence that when people are doing better, they don't stay on. Unlike, I think there's some legitimate constructive criticism about some of the other benefits like general assistance, that sometimes people don't give that up when they're able to afford things better on their own.
Well, food stamps, it's not that much money that we're talking.
$1.50 a meal.
Right.
$1.50. I did that. And for $1.50, you are not getting the kind of food that really anybody knows is appropriate or that you want.
So with rising income inequality, a greater gap between rich and poor, we find hunger being a bigger problem. If food stamps can't really answer that question because they're not capable and they're not fully funded, what's the single most important thing we can do to address income inequality?
Well, there's a couple of things that are already happening. I mean, we're looking at making sure, since women still have pay inequality issues, I'm a co-sponsor in Congress for the Pay Equity Act, or the Paycheck Fairness Act. Those are very important federal measures. We've seen there be attempts, and productive attempts at the local level, to have minimum wage increases. The federal government hasn't had a minimum wage increase in a very, very long time. And to put that in perspective, $100 million in food stamps annually is spent on active duty men and women in the military. Now, if we're paying people enough, explain to me why people who sacrifice their lives for this country are on food stamps while being paid by the federal government to serve in the military. So it is about getting all of those addressed, and it is about making sure that we have some job growth. And I'll give you another thing that we're working on: immigration reform. Immigration reform is going to be a huge economic boost to this country. Everything that does an economic investment, increases wages, solves this problem so that you don't need as much in the public benefits. And in the meantime, I don't think draconian cuts. I'd be happy to discuss with any member of Congress productive reforms. And I'm hoping that we get a farm bill that does that, that's more productive at this go around, that we get a conference committee getting that done. And maybe lastly, because I talked too long, but you know what? The other thing that's really important to remember is, without that federal investment, if you just cut it by $40 billion, or you cut the whole program out, who do you think is going to support rural grocery stores? And where do you think that book of business is going to come from for farmers and farmers markets and growers? It trickles into the economy, and it's fragile at best. It's fragile at best in New Mexico. And I know unequivocally that it boosts the economy, as well as does the right thing for hungry families and children in this state who deserve better.
You mentioned immigration reform, and President Obama has made this a big part of his second term. He said he wants to focus on it as soon as the budget kerfuffle is over. But what confidence do New Mexicans and Americans have that a Congress that cannot agree not to default on its debt without a week, 2 week long fight, what confidence can they have that Congress can agree on something as difficult as immigration reform?
The three things about that. When I got to Congress, people already were feeling very nervous. As a candidate, I was clear about there's very little confidence in Congress. I think at that time it was maybe 8 to 11%. Folks thought that was the sort of the support rate by Americans for members of Congress. I think today it's clearly lower, given what you just described during the government shutdown and the debt ceiling fight. So we have to have optimism that it gets better, because getting worse is untenable not only for the United States, but for the global economy. I mean, that's impossible. 2, we have seen some effective bipartisan efforts. The Violence Against Women Act is a very good example of that. It took Republican women in the Senate to break that logjam and move it forward. We've had some other substantive bills actually get through the Congress on the 113th. I'm proud of that. And we saw immigration reform in a bipartisan fashion get done in the Senate, and at least have negotiations. Remember that we didn't have any budget negotiations in the House, which is part of the problem leading up to the government shutdown. Untenable. It should never happen again, should never have happened this time, but we didn't do that.
The Senate has looked pretty functional lately.
Absolutely.
But the House hasn't.
House hasn't.
So how is immigration reform going to get out of the House?
Well, I don't know that it can, but we should not stop fighting. And I haven't lost my optimism that it's got a real shot, because we know it's good for the economy. We've got moderate Republicans who want it. You had a gang of 8, which turned into a gang of 7, so I'm sorry that we lost a Republican, but it was still bipartisan. And we've got a bill that's been introduced by the Democratic caucus that was the core of the Senate bill that passed. We believe if that bill goes to the floor, it passes. So what we need is for the Speaker and the leadership in the House, who finally gave up this fight, to now take on other issues through the end. And I feel more confident that now that that fight has occurred, that there's better opportunity to do the right thing on immigration reform and the Farm Bill.
You know, a lot of these solutions you talked about, the beginnings of the budget deal and several other high-profile pieces of legislation have come through the Senate and have been pushed by a bipartisan group of women.
I was going to add that if you didn't. If the women are breaking through. I'm part of the most bipartisan freshman class in the history of Congress. It's the women. I'm one of the presidents leading that effort. And I think that this is really good news. And I hope we see more women elected to Congress to do exactly that same effort, because I do think that's having a real impact.
Have you formed close friendships or strong working relationships with Republican women in the House?
Absolutely. And it really does make a difference. I even played on the bipartisan softball team, and for folks, I'm sure we're going to talk more about the government shutdown, somebody might say, wow, thanks a lot. Well, I mean, this happened early, and it's after hours. We raised money for breast cancer victims and survivors and their families, but it's a chance to get to know these women. It's about their own struggles, their own issues, their own districts, and I'll give you 3. Kristi Noem from Montana, or no, she's from South Dakota. She's had a really tough time given the disaster there, and so you've got bipartisan efforts, even though we've got federal deficit issues, to really make sure we don't leave our states in a situation where they can't count on the federal government for federal disaster relief. We've got folks like Martha Roby, who are very conservative and very fiscally conservative, but recognize that having a log jam and not opening up the government doesn't get us any further on the issues that do have to be addressed. And I've got, you know, incredible respect, and we've got pretty big divide in the difference of opinion, but we work to compromise and find solutions. And Ileana from Florida is another powerhouse, and there's somebody who I think is going to be effective in helping us understand some of the immigration issues out of Florida.
Time magazine had a story that was headlined, "Women are the only adults left in Washington." Do you agree with that?
You know, that's a hard thing for me to just pick on the other gender. I'm getting to know plenty of really great men on both sides of the aisle. But when you have just a minority voice and doesn't allow any other voices or issues to be identified or heard, and if women were to shut out all the male voices, there's no way we get to a functioning Congress. But women are natural compromisers. Women recognize, I think we all do, that if you broke apart our families, this is no good for anyone, and we are breaking apart America. And we've had enough, and we really want to start building American confidence, constituent confidence. We want to pave a path forward for all members of Congress to see the benefit of productive compromise in the end. We should all be assertive, very productive advocates for the issues we believe in and for our constituents. But in the end, move forward.
Speaking of constituent confidence, you've been a big supporter of the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. But the rollout of the exchange websites this month has been a little bit of a disaster.
More than disappointing.
So what are you doing to make sure that people enroll at the expected rate, despite the fact that for the first few weeks, not as many people as the administration had hoped have been able to sign up?
Well, a couple of things. So we're working with the healthcare community, and we've got a healthcare advisory group, and people can contact this office. And so I'm going to make a big plug. Talk to us. We can't enroll you. That's not something that congressional offices are allowed to do. But we can certainly get through to the helplines. We can certainly make sure that you've got as much information so that you know what's coming. And I can weigh in at the federal level to make it clear, although I think it's pretty clear to this administration, that no member of Congress is happy about this, and we expect for it to get resolved as quickly as they can, because you're exactly right. If we don't have folks enroll, then you can't implement fully because we don't have the issue addressed in the way that it was intended to. It's important to note that the state exchanges are working, including New Mexico's Small Business Exchange. And so we can also help navigate that, and very excited that the New Mexico Exchange is doing as well as it is. And I remember the days of the Medicare Part D rollout and Medicare Part C, which were terrible and disastrous, and the same headlines. And my hope is that we can get that addressed in short order and bring back confidence. And then I think Congress has to be open-minded about reasonable changes to the Affordable Care Act, unintended, unforeseen issues that can be addressed, better benefits that we could build on, and to be open-minded about that as we move forward in this large reform.
In the headlines this month, there was another episode of gun violence, this time at a school in Nevada. What do we need to do to stop gun violence in schools?
You know, I will tell you that and there's nothing more terrible than the government shutdown. There were no winners, only losers. It was the worst thing I've had to be a participant in. It's because I know what it did right back here. But the very first large disappointment for me as a brand new Congresswoman was that we couldn't even get background checks passed in the Senate, which you described as the most functional body in Congress. I think that we have to keep fighting for getting what's right. I also think that women are going to be the group bipartisan that brings that to a head in the second part of the 113th. Gun violence is not going down. There are thousands of people who have been victimized by gun violence since the debate on just the background checks. And, you know, I have been a pretty outspoken advocate that we should be doing everything, nothing in terms of a compromise should be left off the table. If we can save one life, one suicide, one child, and we can improve the well-being of the students in these schools who are afraid to go to school. You know, I don't know what I would do if I was raising my children in this environment and you have no idea about how to manage those risks. And I think it's really shameful that we can't even do a criminal background check. And I'll tell you, during this whole debate about the Affordable Care Act, there were many of my conservative colleagues who said you need to have background checks, you need to have credit checks, that navigators have to have all of that, and many states, and in fact have done that for their health care Affordable Care Act navigators. And I say to those very people, you want to protect privacy information for health care, but you won't ask somebody who's going to purchase a firearm to do the very same? That's the biggest hypocrisy I frankly have heard in Congress today.
Do you think that the Tea Party faction that in the end pushed the shutdown, do you think they're going to come out of this situation empowered or more likely to compromise?
Well, you know, I hate predicting what those outcomes are going to be because I could be wrong. But I'll give you two different perspectives, and we'll get our viewers to have what I think is the best things to watch going forward. I think it was fair by every Tea Party member who said, I represent a district who doesn't have confidence in the federal government, who believes it's too big, who recognizes that our deficit spending is out of control, and that we need to do drastic things to address that. And they despise the Affordable Care Act. And so I'm going to represent that. They're right. They were elected to represent those issues. Where I do not think that they're right is that every other voice has to be drowned out until a minority view today in Congress gets their way. That's not a democracy. Debate, compromise, looking at new ideas, hearing everybody out, that's a democracy. And because of that shutdown, Tea Party definitely lost, this is because there were no winners, but lost in this context, that I think democracy, that we have been screaming for democracy, that was definitely heard. We call that bring regular order back to Congress. We will debate bills, you can amend bills on the floor, that we're going to go to conference, that we're going to have compromisers. And I think that the Tea Party certainly lost the ability, and they should have, to stop that. But I do think there are many people still who have no faith in their federal government, which puts a bigger burden on somebody like me to show the best things that public servants do and the differences that we make, and to be firm and strong about cutting out waste and cutting out fraud and taking things out of government that don't work. So we're building credibility on the sides that really have the right kinds of impact moving forward.
A lot of the folks, the representatives in that faction, the Tea Party faction, represent really safe districts where, you're right, they were elected to do what they're doing now, to challenge the status quo, to get rid of Obamacare. But it does contribute to gridlock, like we've seen in the past few weeks. Some states have decided to break through that kind of gridlock with a combination of strategies, including open primaries, where Republicans and Democrats compete against each other, and independent redistricting commissions that do a little less gerrymandering. Are those strategies you'd support?
You know, I would support anything that makes Congress more effective, and I think gerrymandering is a significant problem in this country. And state legislative bodies, which are political bodies, control those decisions, and I think it's not been productive for this country. And I think the independent commissions is exactly the way to go. I would add one, campaign finance reform. That's got to be added to the mix so that you take out all the special interest aspects to the highest degree that you can. And I've got a modest campaign finance reform bill taking dark money out of 501c4s that is bipartisan, that I hope will get the right kind of traction in the next year and get passed out of the House. So I think that all of those ideas, and I think California can give you some constructive criticism about what they call a jungle primary where everybody's in, and what they will also identify as been real benefits to make sure that you minimize sort of a single issue focused representative getting into Congress and having a mindset that they won't do anything else, work on anything else, and don't respect the democratic process as a whole.
Would you be comfortable competing in an open primary?
Listen, this is not an easy job, whether it's an open primary or not. You know, I really want this job. It's important to me. New Mexico is important to me, and I'm willing to do everything I can to show constituents that I'm the right person for the job, and I'm willing to do that in whatever my constituents thinks is the most effective way to do that.
Representative, thank you for being with us.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.